Well, hello and welcome to Sunday Morning Coffee with Dr. Childress. In this Sunday morning talk, I'm going to be discussing the Ireland's policy paper on parental alienation. And the reason I'm selecting this or addressing this, excuse me, is because it raises an important issue in the family courts, the use of the term parental alienation. I have advocated since the day I have entered the family court systems, working with the pathology, that everybody stop using the construct of parental alienation. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. It's made up stuff. And yet people just keep doing it. They just keep living in a world of fantasy, making stuff up. And so here we are in the 21st century, 2024, and we have official organizations, Irish government and policy papers, absolutely medieval. You might as well be talking about demon possession as parental alienation. Absolutely medieval. Come up into the 21st century. Let's start talking about real things. And the moment you start talking about real things, you're going to be able to solve it. Ireland is ahead of England. Ireland's processing the issue. Ireland has the proper motivation. The difficulty is you're using this parental alienation thing. The moment you switch over to real established knowledge, everything's solved. But you just don't do it. And I don't understand why you remain ignorant. So let's take a look at the Irish public policy paper here and see what's up with that. So first thing, as I said, there's no such thing as parental alienation. That is a euphemism to hide child abuse. So understand that clearly, that when you use the word parental alienation, you are hiding the fact that it's actually child abuse. The pathology of concern in the family courts that lay people call parental alienation is child abuse. That's a DSM-5 diagnosis of child psychological abuse. It's already in the DSM. So be really, really clear on this. If you're arguing that parental alienation is not in the DSM, that's just because you're ignorant. Yes, it is. It's a DSM-5 diagnosis of V995.51 child psychological abuse. So don't tell me it's not in the DSM. Yes, it is. It's just that you're not calling it child abuse because you're hiding the fact that it's child abuse by using these terms, these euphemisms. The pathology in the family is a factitious disorder or factitious attachment pathology. The pathology of concern in the family courts when lay people use the construct of parental alienation is a false, factitious, artificially created attachment pathology imposed on the child for secondary gain to the allied parent, of manipulating the court's decisions regarding child custody and to meet the pathological parent's own emotional and psychological needs. That is a DSM-5 diagnosis of 300.19 factitious disorder imposed on another. Do not tell me this pathology is not in the DSM-5. You just haven't looked because you're too lazy. That's the only reason. Lazy. You're too lazy to look in the DSM-5, to apply the DSM-5, because if you do, you will recognize that this is a false, factitious attachment pathology being imposed on the child for secondary gain of manipulating the court's decisions on child custody. FDIA 300.19. The concern in the family courts when lay people use the construct of parental alienation is a shared induced persecutory delusion created by the pathogenic parenting of an allied narcissistic borderline dark personality parent. A DSM-5 diagnosis of a shared induced delusional thought disorder. Don't tell me it's not in the DSM-5. Family systems. Their concern in the family courts when lay people use the construct of parental alienation is the child's triangulation into the spousal conflict through the formation of a cross-generational coalition of the child with the allied parent against the targeted parent, resulting in an emotional cutoff in the child's attachment bond to the targeted parent. How much knowledge do you need to avoid to use parental alienation? You want me to draw you a picture of the pathology in the family courts? Okay, I will draw you a picture of it. There it is from Mnuchin and Nichols, 1993. How long ago was that? 30 years ago that we know what the pathology is? It's a cross-generational. Look at that. That's a father and the son in a cross-generational coalition against the mother. And you see where there's the cutoffs between the son and the mother. That picture shows a triangulation. You see the triangle, cross-generational coalition, father, son. That three lines are an enmeshment, emotional cutoff. There it is, inverted hierarchy. The son is judging the mother as if the mother was a child and the child was a parent, because the hierarchy is all messed up and you have the enmeshment of the father and the son. There it is. I got a little explanation of a cross-generational coalition. One's a divorce, inverted hierarchy, emotional cutoff. There it is. There it is. Why are you using parental alienation, cross-generational coalition? Because you're ignorant about family systems. Why are you ignorant about family systems? Because you're lazy. Seriously, if you're ignorant about family systems pathology when you're working with a family, you're just lazy. You're just too lazy to learn Mnuchin and Bowen and Haley and Madonis and Satir and everything related to families. And instead you run off and make up stuff like parental alienation because you're just ignorant. It's just phenomenal. And you fight to remain ignorant. You fight not to apply knowledge, not to solve it. And when you do that, you're hiding the child abuse. Because the moment you apply knowledge, it becomes clear it's child psychological abuse. Creating a factitious disorder, that's child abuse. Delusional thought, that's child abuse. And so the moment you apply knowledge, it's child abuse. So you're participating in the child abuse. You people who use the parental alienation word, you're participating in the child abuse by covering it up, by hiding it. This pathology hides exceedingly well. That's its first defense. And you're participating in covering it up. Yikes. Unethical practice. The use of the construct of parental alienation in a professional capacity is substantially beneath professional standards of practice in clinical psychology and is in violation of Standard 2.04 Bases for Scientific and Professional Judgments of the Ethics Code of the American Psychological Association. 2.04 Bases for Scientific and Professional Judgments. Psychologists' work is based upon the established scientific and professional knowledge of the discipline. The established scientific and professional knowledge of the discipline ethically required for application with court-involved custody conflict is attachment pathology, Bowlby, family systems therapy, Mnuchin, child abuse and complex trauma, Van der Kolk, personality disorder pathology, Beck, child development, Tronic, psychological control, Barber, and the DSM-5 diagnostic system. Now, I will challenge you to look through the Ireland position paper on parental alienation and see the application of any of this knowledge. That's unethical practice for a psychologist. So maybe they're not psychologists, maybe they're just random lay people coming up with opinions. But if you're talking about how to solve a pathology, I suggest you get like clinical psychologists advising you. And if you have clinical psychologists advising you on this position paper, I would say who's ever the psychologist on that position paper, bring them up for violation of Standard 2.0. Oh, it's an American ethics standard. So you'll have to look to your Ireland ethics standards. I would look to your boundaries of competence standard in your Irish ethics standards and see if the advising psychologists to this position paper have competence in the diagnostic assessment of delusional thought disorders and in the diagnostic assessment and treatment of attachment pathology and factitious disorders. It's a factitious attachment pathology, so we need to know both attachment pathology and factitious disorders. Because you know what? The attachment system is a motivational system. That means it always has a direction. All motivational systems have a direction to them. Eating, pleasure, pain, sex, attachment. all motivate towards a direction. The attachment system always motivates towards attachment bonding to the parent. The reason is a motivation for the other direction is death. The death by starvation, death by predation. So over millions of years of evolution, one direction results in child death, one direction results in child life by protection from the parent. Guess what? We have a primary motivational system in the brain for attachment bonding to that parent. It has a direction to bond to that parent because the other direction is death. That's what makes it a motivational system. Children do not reject a parent because that's death. The only way I can flip a primary motivational system of the brain to not motivate in that direction is if I have child abuse range parenting. So I have child abuse in this situation. If I've got a child rejecting a parent, the only thing that causes that is child abuse, not parental alienation. There's no such thing as that. That's a euphemism to cover the fact that this is child abuse, one way or the other. The use of the construct of parental alienation in a professional capacity is a euphemism for child abuse and hides the pathology in the family courts that is the psychological abuse of children. The use of the construct of parental alienation is substantially beneath professional standards of practice in clinical psychology and is in violation of ethical standards of practice 2.04. The use of the construct of parental alienation represents ignorant professional practice. Google ignorant, lack of knowledge or information. I am using that in the definition of the English language. They are ignorant by definition of the English language. Ignorant decisions are bad decisions. Ignorant opinions have no value. Don't be lazy. And the use of the construct of parental alienation in a professional capacity degrades the quality of mental health services in the family courts. Stop it. Stop making things up. The Ireland policy paper on parental alienation represents ignorant professional practice. Google ignorant, lack of knowledge or information. The policy paper on parental alienation from Ireland is ignorant by definition of the English language. Do you see any of the applied established knowledge in there? Anything about attachment being a motivational system with direction to it? Anything about family systems, cross-generational coalitions? Anything about delusional thought disorders or factitious attachment pathology or child psychological abuse from the DSM-5? It is ignorant by definition of the English language. They should be ashamed of themselves. Negligent professional practice. Google negligence, failure to take proper care in doing something. Did they expend the effort to learn about families and family systems? We're working with families. Did they expend the effort to learn about delusional thought disorders or about factitious disorders or about the attachment system being a primary motivational system of the brain? It's called a goal-corrected motivational system because it always maintains the goal of forming an attachment bond. Or are they just negligent, lazy, indolent? Unethical practice. The Ireland policy paper on parental alienation represents unethical professional practice. It's a violation of standard 2.04 of the APA ethics code. Ireland, maybe you're not, bound by the standards of the American Psychological Association, but I am. And so for Dr. Childress, your policy paper, if I put my name on your policy paper, Ireland, I'm looking at sanctions for violation of my ethical code standards, mandatory requirements to apply the established knowledge. And your paper didn't do that. Okay, so let's take a look at what they did do, their Ireland policy paper. Parental alienation as a concept is difficult to define. Yep. And to determine. Yep. In very general terms, it relates to a process through which a child becomes estranged from a parent as a result of psychological manipulation, psychological control, Barber, shared delusion, factitious disorder of the other parent. Why didn't they put a little thing to Barbara there on that, the little citation to that? Psychological manipulation of the parent, or to situations where one parent is wrongfully influencing their child or children against the other parent. So there you got, right there is the euphemism to cover up the delusional thought disorder and the factitious attachment pathology that is wrongfully inducing a shared induced persecutory delusion. Say it, because it's child psychological abuse. You are covering up the psychological child abuse. It's driving me crazy, and I want to make it really, really, really clear. The people on this policy paper of the Ireland position paper on parental alienation are participating in the psychological abuse of children and in the spousal abuse of the targeted parent using the child as a weapon, because they are covering up the fact that the pathology in the family courts is child abuse. If they applied actual real knowledge to their analysis, they would reach the conclusion that the pathology is child abuse. So by not applying established knowledge, by using made-up things, by giving themselves permission, because they're entitled to just make stuff up, by giving themselves permission to just make stuff up rather than provide the effort necessary to apply real knowledge, every one of those authors of the position paper is participating in the psychological abuse of the child by covering it up. I would say that's negligent. I would say they failed to show proper care in their obligations. They failed to learn and apply or seek the knowledge, established knowledge of professional psychology, and instead just gave themselves permission to wander around in their realms of fantasy. Okay. My statement, there's no such thing as parental alienation. The authors of the position paper are simply ignorant, lack of knowledge or information about real forms of pathology, FDIA, shared persecutory delusions, cross-generational coalitions, and child psychological abuse. And they think that's okay. The lack of consensus internationally regarding the definition of parental alienation is also reflected in Ireland. You people can't even define what it is. Stop using it. Use real things and you will solve it immediately. The research report noted that while the term parental alienation has arisen in family law cases in Ireland, there is not a commonly used definition. Gardner, the rejection of a parent by a child has been incorporated to various degrees. You're covering up child abuse. That's just fundamental. Okay, so you have undiagnosed and unchecked child abuse rampant in the Irish courts because you're using something that cannot be defined. Just use a different word. Instead of calling it parental alienation, call it bigglebop. Oh, we've got a case of bigglebop in the family courts. Stop it. It's not demon possession. No. Come up medicine, apply knowledge, diagnosis, treatment, DSM-5, shared delusional disorder, factitious disorder, child psychological abuse. Unless you do that, you're participating in the child abuse because you're lazy. There is no defined pathology called parental alienation in clinical psychology. Make-believe things, unicorns, parental alienation. Both equally make-believe. Unicorns and parental alienation. The Ireland position paper. The lack of consensus on a definition of parental alienation creates a complex and challenging issue around assessing claims of parental alienation in the family courts. How does the court determine what constitutes alienating behaviors, and how do they identify these in a legal setting? There is no such thing as parental alienation. It's a unicorn. You're asking me, how do you identify unicorns? Seriously, that's what you're asking. You're coming to the mental health people saying, we need to know if this is a unicorn. No, it's not a unicorn. Okay, it is a shared delusion. It is factitious disorder imposed on another. It is child psychological abuse. It's spousal abuse using the child as a weapon. So it's a lot of real things, but it's not a unicorn. And if you're trying to figure out whether it's a unicorn, you're going to be in kind of complex situations and confused. So here's, based on what I'm reading from Ireland, here's their Irish decision making in their family courts. They rely on unicorns, make-believe things, like parental alienation, so that they're relying on their decision making based on make-believe things. And for the real things, FDIA, nope. Shared delusional disorder, nope. Child psychological abuse, nope. Spouse or partner abuse, nope. Personality pathology, nope. Cross-generational coalitions, nope. So any of the real things that exist in professional psychology and that are actually causing the problem in the family courts, the Irish are not using that as a foundation for their decision making. They want to know if it's a unicorn. Based on some definition, they can't even figure out what it is. We can't figure out what it is, but we need an answer as to whether or not it is that thing. Differential diagnosis and all of healthcare. Okay, it's diagnosis guides treatment. So as soon as you come back to healthcare, we can get this solved. Differential diagnosis. Targeted parent. Is the targeted parent abusing the child in some way, thereby creating the child's attachment pathology towards that parent? Or is the allied parent psychologically abusing the child by creating a shared induced persecutory delusion and false factitious attachment pathology in the child for secondary gain to the parent of manipulating the court's decisions on child custody? There's absolutely 100% ways of determining whether or not those two diagnoses are present. Okay, so I can absolutely give you an answer to that differential diagnosis with 100% certainty from a proper assessment. Foundational diagnoses. So what we're basically looking at is, does the allied parent have a persecutory delusion surrounding the targeted parent, and does the child share this persecutory belief, a fixed and false belief that the child is being malevolently treated in some way? That would be DSM-5 297.1, delusional disorder, persecutory type, parentheses, shared. And does the child have a false, factitious, artificially created attachment pathology imposed on the child by the pathogenic parenting of the allied parent? That would be a factitious DSM-5 300.9, factitious disorder imposed on another. Do not tell me the pathology is not in the DSM-5. I've got two diagnoses, main diagnoses in the DSM-5, shared delusional disorder, factitious disorder imposed on another. And I've got two V codes, child psychological abuse and spouse or partner abuse, psychological, using the child as a weapon. Don't tell me it's not in the DSM. That's just ignorant, lack of knowledge or information. Ignorant opinions are of no value. Don't be lazy. Creating a persecutory thought disorder, a psychotic level pathology in the child that then destroys the child's attachment bond to the other parent, a DSM-5 diagnosis of 297.1 delusional disorder shared and 300.19 factitious disorder imposed on another, is a DSM-5 diagnosis of V995.51 child psychological abuse. Are you assessing for delusional thought disorders? Are you assessing for factitious disorders? Are you assessing for child psychological abuse? If you're not, you're failing to show proper care in doing what you're doing. That's negligence, and you are failing in your duty to protect because of your ignorant and unethical malpractice. Mental health people. The pathology of concern in the family courts is not parental alienation. The pathology of concern is child psychological abuse. The pathology of the concern in the family courts is a shared persecutory delusion. I keep telling you, but you don't listen. And factitious attachment pathology imposed on the child by a narcissistic, borderline, dark personality parent for secondary gain of manipulating the court's decisions regarding child custody and to meet the parent's own emotional and psychological needs. Okay. There's no such thing as parental alienation. So my recommendations to you, Ireland, baseline recommendation, just baseline. It's not even a recommendation yet. It's just like orienting to reality in life. Recommendation 1, don't be ignorant. Apply knowledge to solve pathology. Ignorance solves nothing. That's recommendation 1. Stop using the term parental alienation. Use real knowledge. Recommendation 1. In all cases, all of severe attachment pathology surrounding child custody conflict, a child rejecting a parent, a proper risk assessment for child abuse needs to be conducted to the appropriate differential diagnoses for each parent. Targeted parent is abusive. Is the targeted parent abusing the child in some way, thereby creating the child's attachment pathology towards that parent? Or is the allied parent creating a shared induced persecutory delusion and false factitious attachment pathology in the child for secondary gain to the parent? There's your question. Recommendation 2. I would recommend that the Irish legislature should fund a pilot program for the family courts with university involvement for evaluation research to develop the diagnostic assessment and treatment protocols for the differential diagnoses of concern surrounding court-involved custody conflict. I recommend that to everybody I talk to. If you're struggling with what to do in the family courts, task your universities with solving it. Once you start to apply real knowledge, you can go to your universities and say, look, we got a factitious attachment pathology and shared delusion over here, and we need a diagnostic assessment and treatment protocols for that. Can you help us develop those? And the university researchers will say, oh, absolutely. And they'll pull in their team of people and the psychiatrist, a mental status exam of thought and perception. That's the assessment for delusional thought disorder. So we can get the targeted parent, the allied parent, do a mental status exam of thought and perception and pop the delusion right out in their session. That's how we make a diagnosis of delusional thought disorders. Did you know that? We don't make delusions, thought disorders based on history. We have something called a mental status exam of thought and perception, very linear exam format kind of thing. And we pop the delusion out right in our session. We can take a look at it and do stuff on it. Rated on the brief psychiatric rating scale. Item 11, unusual thought content. I recommend we routinely use the BPRS for rating symptoms, especially item 11, unusual thought content. My rating, based on what I know about BPRS and delusional thought disorders, is the delusional thought disorder you have in the family courts would rate about a 5, moderately severe delusional thought disorder on the BPRS, brief psychiatric rating scale. You can Google that, Wikipedia BPRS. And so you're looking at a moderate persecutory delusion in the family courts, and you don't even know it. Whoosh! Because you're just making up stuff and prancing around looking for unicorns. So, there's your differential diagnosis on the situation. So you can rely on unicorns and make-believe things like parental alienation, or you can rely on real things to solve real pathology. I suggest if you're actually motivated to solve the problem and to protect children from child abuse, you'll use real things, and you'll solve it immediately. And I'm willing to debate this anytime with anyone, anywhere. Set it up, platform. Formal debate. I think we should be having these formal debates all the time. Okay, I think AFCC, Association Family Conciliation Courts, Ireland, you go host a formal debate. Does parental alienation exist? I'll take the no side. I'll say no, it doesn't. It's a factitious disorder, shared delusion, child psychological abuse, and using that term covers up the fact that it's these real things. Now you find somebody who says parental alienation actually exists and is willing to make that argument. Then you put us up and you 2-hour moderated debate, and then we have all the information's up on the line. Okay, I'll do that. I'm in. Find somebody. You won't find anybody because they're charlatans and frauds. Everybody who uses mental health people who use the term parental alienation, let me be clear on this, are charlatans and frauds. So are the ones who say reunification therapy. Yeah, I do reunification therapy. If you're working with a charlatan and a fraud, there's no such thing as reunification therapy. Are they telling you that? There's no such thing as parental alienation. Are they telling you that? If they're not telling you that, then they're a charlatan and fraud, and they're getting you to believe there's such a thing called parental alienation. They're getting you to believe there's such a thing as reunification therapy, so that you give them their money and nothing gets solved. So that is just really bad in the family courts. Oh my goodness, it's so bad. And so another debate topic is child psychological abuse being misdiagnosed in the Irish courts. I'll say yes. Based on what I'm reading out of this position paper you're not even close to understanding what the pathology is. So yeah, if you're not conducting a proper risk assessment for a possible shared persecutory delusion and factitious attachment pathology, then yeah, there's absolutely 100% misdiagnosed child psychological abuse because you're not even looking for it. And it's there. I know it's there because we got narcissistic, borderline, dark personality people. 10% of the population, roughly. Guess how many wind up custody, or how many divorces wind up high custody? About 10%. I wonder if it's related. So with that, that's my talk on the issue of parental alienation. I used the Irish position paper on parental alienation to make my point. Hopefully, I've made my point. Ireland, I actually am attending to you. I think you have good movement in your direction in solving things. I think your parent people are relatively active and good. The professionals in Ireland, I think, are seeking a solution. But as long as you're using unicorns, you're looking for unicorns, nothing's going to happen for you. But if you actually get a pilot program for the family courts and start applying real knowledge and take leadership on this, you'll be able to help England, because they're struggling down in England with Kafkas and stuff. They're struggling. There's just a problem down there. I'm thinking the Balkans actually may do this faster than anybody else because it doesn't require anything other than the motivation to solve it. That's all it requires, is the motivation to solve it, because all the knowledge is there once we apply it. But if you don't apply it, you're going to wind up with ignorant opinions and no solution. So with that, I'm headed off to my Sunday here, and we'll check in next week for another Sunday coffee with Dr. Childress here.